Today, my parents will say things like, oh, they just think that I've changed, and they don't really get like, oh, I do all these things. And if I say I go to therapy or whatever, it gets very quiet and uncomfortable. But I'm open about it, and I think that I honestly it still makes them uncomfortable to talk about. It's
Yeah.
not something that's talked about.
Hey y'all, what's going on? Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety. I'm your host, Ray Donovan, and I'm excited. Today we have Sweta joining us, and I'm really looking forward to getting into her story because I think that she kind of gets into some stigmas that we don't get an opportunity to talk about, even on this show, as often as we get together. So we're going to get into underrepresented journeys, her stigmas. We're going to get into kind of co-occurring, kind of maladies and disorders that she's fought back from. So without further ado, Sweta, thank you so much for joining the Stacking Days podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a complete honor and privilege to be able to share my story to help others. So I'm excited to share.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to get into it. So let's do just that. We'll start this thing off the way that we usually do. Let's go back to the beginning. And I know we have a couple kind of monsters in the room that we're going to slay here over this course of this conversation. This podcast generally is about overcoming alcohol addiction, but I know that you have had other addictions. So I don't know if one preceded the other, but let's go back to the beginning, and at least with alcohol. How did your relationship with alcohol begin, and was it driven by some of the other issues that you had been struggling with? And I'll hand the mic over to you, and we can kind of go from there.
Thank you. Yes, we can go all the way back to the beginning. So for me, I believe that alcoholism is something that runs in my family. I think there's different tiers to it. And I believe I'm just the garden variety. Once I start, I can't stop. Once it enters my system, I have no idea what's going to happen. And so I started drinking I was probably about 12 when I had my first drink. And it was like my grandfather, just a little sip of his whiskey, like that kind of thing. So it wasn't anything crazy. And I remember at that time, it was like gross. I didn't want anything to do with it because it was just kind of the little finger tasting the brandy with your finger. And
Yep.
then when I actually had a drink where I feel like I ingested it and got the feeling of alcohol in my body, I was in ninth grade, and that was Absolute Vodka. I had a shot of Absolute Vodka, and I remember the moment it went down into my body, everything that I ever felt in my whole entire life went away. So I have childhood trauma. I have a lot of different things that sort of happened to me, even just basic things like bullying, like being from Nepal and going to school and being the only Nepalese person in the whole entire school in the United States. I was born there, and we moved to the United States, and I had an Australian accent because we jumped around a little bit. I just, right away, I never felt like I belonged
Hmm.
anywhere. And so the bullying and just like being made fun of, I also was a chubbier kid. So I got made fun of on all different types of front. And I don't care how, like, trauma is trauma, the way, however you want to put it. That was traumatic for me to go through school and not have friends and just not want to be there since the beginning of my education career. And so all of that, and then later on, there was an incident that happened to me, and I'm not going to go into detail on that, but it was very traumatic. And that also then put me into a disassociated state. And I was around the age of 8. I was in third grade. And I just remember completely cutting off from life. Like, if you were to look at my grades, the feedback my parents were getting from the teachers, and it was a lot as a child to be able to have to go through all of those things. And then also my parents, who thought, here we are, we're in the land of the free, we're in the United States, we're in America, we made it. Like, there's probably nothing that could, here we are. This is the best case scenario. So I think a lot of things just went under the radar because of culturally how things get pushed under the rug or are not talked about. We didn't communicate much. There wasn't a lot of that going on. So
Mm,
when I finally took that drink, it was like my face, my hair, everything. Like I got blonde hair, I got blue eyes. Like all of a sudden, I started to look more like what I thought would help me fit in.
mm,
And I started to chase that dragon. Like just all I wanted to do was drink and not feel, drink and not feel. And it's funny because my parents at the time thought that I was just hanging out with the bad kids, but I was the bad influence. I knew where every kid's parent, every one of my friends' parents kept their alcohol. If they were, doing any other kind of like recreational drugs, like, if there was marijuana in the house, things like that. I mean, I knew where everything was and I knew how to get everything.
mm,
And so it was all about numbing, numbing, numbing. I just didn't want to feel. And the number one thing for me, as why I'm sober is because once I start, I really can't stop. It's something comes over me. I have this, craving that is beyond my mental control and I just can't stop. And so it just kind of went on like that. And I didn't know there was something wrong with me. And I don't want to say wrong with me. I think that I was in a diseased state of mind. And so I used a substance to numb out. And when I got into high school, and I started drinking, I also developed an eating disorder. So, well, I should back up. And when I was 8 years old, I developed an eating disorder. So there is now this food addiction piece where once I started eating and emotional binge eating, that made me feel worse. And so I would drink over that too. So there was just this vicious cycle of doing this one activity that would lead into this other activity
mm.
and both to numb out. And then, that continued on basically until I was in senior year. And my family, I'm pretty sure looking back, and they've never said this to me, but I'm sure they were having family meetings. Like I have two sisters. My youngest sister was way too young to really be involved, but my mom, my dad, and my older sister, I'm pretty sure they were sitting down and being like, what are we going to do about her? Because I was coming home late, I was sneaking out. All I wanted to do was drink and all of that. And one night I came home and I had I was at a party, and my parents, this is right after high school, I was going to the University of Maryland. And my parents, at that point, just kind of gave up on me because there's really, oh, well, at least she got into college. Like maybe it's going to be okay.
Right. She'll grow
Um,
out of it.
yeah, she'll grow out of it. Maybe like, University of Maryland's not exactly the easiest school to get into. So it's probably going to be okay. And so, but I did feel this sense of like, we're kind of giving up feeling as well. And I came home, I was failing all my classes. I couldn't stop drinking. And my sister was waiting up for me, and I had taken, I don't know, I ate shrooms. I ate shrooms that night. And I came home, and it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. And I came home because I was like, I'm going to start tripping and I should not be driving, which is not something I ever thought of before. But since I wasn't drinking that night, I guess I was thinking more clearly. I don't know, because that's not part of my story. I did drink and drive, unfortunately, and I am ashamed to say that, but that's part of my story too. And so I came home, and she was waiting for me, and she said, "Hey, what do you think of the military?" And I was like, "What?" And, getting ready to, I was on drugs.
Right.
And at the time, I just remember I started hallucinating, and it was like, whoa, I just saw all these colors. And I was like, that sounds great. And I always thought we were having this special like experience and this bond. And she wanted to take me the next morning. And I was like, wow, like maybe we're going to be close.
Mhm.
But I was on drugs. So I
This is
went
your
to my
this is your
roommate.
older sister?
This is my older sister.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure they probably had a conversation about this and that she was gonna wait up for me and then she was gonna, and so lucky for her, because I was on drugs, I said, "That sounds great." And so we went, the next day, and I, while tripping, signed my life away to the United States Marine Corps. And, yeah, so I did that. 3 days later, they had me detox, they had me do all of this stuff, and I lied to them about my alcohol use and the the drugs and all of that. But when they give you a drug test, it came back that it was positive. So they had to do all of this stuff to clean it out.
Mhm.
And I went to boot camp. And when my head started to clear up, was thinking, yes, this is exactly what I want to do, because it will, in the paperwork, it said that it will turn you into a different person, that they will literally strip you of everything and turn you into this proud Marine. And I was
Mm.
like, well, that's what I need. They'll put me in boot camp and I'll come out and I'll be sober. Not only that, my eating disorder will be gone, and like my obsession with like being thin would be gone. I thought somehow they were going to go into my brain and scrub out me so I could
Mm.
come back as someone else. And I got out of boot camp, and the first place I went to was to see my friends. And of course, I knew where all my friends were because they were at happy hour. And nobody knew that I was gone. And so when I showed up, which is like typical for me, I always would run away and do something crazy and then show back up. And I showed up to this happy hour. I was gone for 3 months. My parents weren't telling anybody where I was. And all my friends were like, oh my God, she's been sent away, or sent to Nepal and shipped off and locked away, or
'Cause you
whatever.
literally just disappeared and were and,
I disappeared.
okay.
I disappeared. I was hiding behind, like, those 3 days before I went into boot camp, I was hiding in the back of the cars in case, like, my friends would see me with these recruiters. I was,
Mm.
like, wearing hoodies. I didn't want any I thought this was gonna be it. I was gonna come back somebody else. And, I came back, I went to happy hour. They're like, "Oh my God, where have you been?" I was like, "Oh, I'm a Marine." And they're like, "Wait, you joined the Marine Corps?" And so it's just like craziness. And
Uh.
my Marine Corps career was insane because there was a lot of drinking there.
Yeah,
And
I was gonna say, when you were recounting that, I was thinking, because I used to live and work in Washington, DC, right off of 8th Street Northeast, right by the barracks at one at and that was just a crazy scene, because like all the Marines would come down 8th Street, and they'd be out all hours of the night, and I was like, this doesn't look like a very healthy environment to like become your best self. Not taking anything away from all the men and women who are out there, but it sounds like for someone who's going into it struggling with a substance, that is not the space to kind of remove yourself from the substance. So
no, not at all. Things got worse really, really, really fast. I mean, now not only did I have freedom because I was away from, my parents and all of that, I mean, it was terrible. I drank every single day. I was drinking on the job. I was get caught drunk at work, and they would I was sent in. I blacked out a couple of times. They sent me into like to see the therapist, and they put me on different types of antidepressants, and I would just drink with those. So then they had to take me off. I mean, it was terrible. It was terrible. My
mm,
eating disorder was out of control. I was the heaviest I'd ever been. They put me in a platoon called Porky Pig Platoon, where they would run me twice a day. And I ended up developing something called bursitis in my hip, and then patellofemoral pain syndrome in my knee, which eventually, I used to wear a ring, like a massive ring on my finger, just to like try to keep people away from me. I was in a platoon with 65 guys, and it was just two of us girls. And I was with the grunts. So when I joined, they told me the reason I joined is they said I was the last person they needed to make their quota for the month. They needed one more person at this recruiting station. And so I wrote down that I wanted to be stationed in California so that I could go into acting and like I
mm,
could be and do that. And they said, "Oh yeah, no problem. We'll have you do this very specific job." So they made up this whole entire job. But what they really did is they made me the communications person, which works with the grunts and has a point 0.3 um, second lifespan and more. Like,
really.
and so when I got there and I found out I wasn't doing this admin position where I was supposed to be running like all the Marine Corps, like everything that happens on base, it was going to be coming through me, like shows and different things like that. And instead, I was a grunt, and I
Mhm.
worked with the grunts at 29 Palms, and I was out there, you know, teaching that. They had me learn how to drive those big the 7 tons. Machine guns. Like I was doing, that's what that's what I was
Wow.
doing. So it's crazy to think about now, but, and I don't like, I look back on my life and I don't regret any of it because it's made me who I am today, and
Sure.
I can laugh about it now, but it was a very hard time in my life. And,
Yeah.
so I got out on medical discharge under honorable conditions because of the hip and the knee. And then I continued to drink. Drugs came back into the story, and luckily, I was like, okay, well, I had this. That was like, as long as I have alcohol, I don't need anything else. So drugs left the story because I had alcohol,
Mhm.
and the drinking started to continue every single day. I mean, and I say all of this. My eating disorder is also going up and down. Like I'm still doing this thing where I'm binging and I'm purging and I'm dieting, and I've got this. I have exercise bulimia, and I have bulimia with laxatives. I mean, you name it. All of this is happening at the same time
Mhm.
with the drinking. And so in 2007, in 2005, I got sober. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get sober. My cousin, I was in college at the time. I went back to college and I was in the theater program. And my cousin, who, drank like me, and I found out he stopped drinking, and we were really close, like so, 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 so close. And I called him up, and I had booked this awesome commercial in Malibu, and I was out there, and I destroyed the whole entire thing because I got the bartender to give me real vodka.
Oh.
So I blacked out. I don't remember
On
what
set.
happened on set.
Okay.
Yeah, it was bad. And it was probably like it probably would have been a really great stepping stone for me because it was like, um, Jennifer Aniston was in the commercial, and anyway, it happened. And, I remember the next day I was in my acting class, and I was running back and forth yet again, puking, in the toilet, like, in the nasty public bathrooms at school, just and I called my cousin. I had one of those Motorola flip phones, and I was like,
Mm.
"I heard you were sober." And he was like, "Yeah," and I was bawling, and he was like, "Yeah," and, he was like, "I went to this place called AA," and I was like, "What the hell is that?" And he was
Mm.
like, "Okay, I'm gonna find this place for you, and you should go there." And I was like, "Okay, whatever, I don't care, I'll do anything, I'm desperate." And I stayed sober for a year, and then I left and I drank. He and I were really close, and, so that happened, and I kind of on and off was drinking, and then in 2007 I, like, hit bottom, and for me, um, basically lost everything, and I called my parents, and I was like at the time I was in Colorado, and I was like, they're like, "What do you want? What do you need from us?" And I was like, "Well, I wanna go to California, like, I want to actually, like, I wanna get better, I wanna try this." And my parents being the wonderful parents that they are, they were like, "Okay, come home and we'll get you a ticket and you can go live with your uncle and get an apartment and go, like, we'll help you." And so I did that, and I drank again and again. And then finally it wasn't even like I had a bad drunk the last drunk of mine. It was just like kind of a regular, it was nothing really crazy happened, but I was so depressed and I was so empty, and I just felt like a shell of a human being. And that day was kind of serendipitous in the sense that, like, my dad came to California, I didn't know he was coming. My
Mhm.
cousin and his wife showed up, and she was sober. And she was like, "Okay, we're going to call this hotline." And I was with her, and I told them I was crying in the back seat that I had drank again. And my cousin was going off on me. "You're such a coward. Like, how could you do this? Like, how can," and like, I don't think people who have like my condition understand that, like, once you start you can't stop, like this, like it's like has such a hold over, it has such a hold over me.
Mhm.
And I mean, I really am powerless over that substance. And um she had me call the hotline, and I met this woman, Diane, who was a drug and alcohol counselor. And she helped me. She let me move in with her for a year. Like, she was
Wow.
like, "You just gotta get sober." She had 4 kids and a husband, and here I was living on her couch, and I had a box to my name. She's like, "You cannot stay at the house that you're staying in right now because the alcohol is flowing freely and you can't seem to not drink it."
Yeah.
So, that was March 16th, 2007. And my life has radically changed ever since. I believe that I've gone through um, like a complete overhauling of personality change in my brain due to all of the tools that have entered into my life to help me. One, I think that the drinking was just a way to cover up a lot of my pain of my life. And when I started to seek help for those things and I started to look inward and change those things, I believed that I had neuroplasticity. And some people call that a spiritual awakening. Some people call that, finding God. I believe that I was able to use tools that changed the very existence of the way that my brain works. Does that mean that I can drink today and no, I don't believe that I can have a drink today and be okay because of that. I believe that my tools help me to stay away from needing to drink over any type of emotional disturbance. So
Mhm.
I got sober in 2007. And then a year into that, I started noticing that I would binge in the middle of the night at this woman's house that I lived in. I would eat all of her kids' food and then I would go back to the grocery store and like put it all back in and then eat whatever would look to make it look like. And I'm talking highly palatable, you know, foods that are meant to be like you want more. For me, like once I start on those, I can't stop too, and that's sugar for me.
Mm.
And so I had an experience where one day I ate too much sugar and it's not like I hadn't done that before, but I don't know, I probably didn't realize that I would black out, and, I ate and this was at work, I was working at the time, and, all the girls were bringing in chocolates from their, like, husbands and all of that, and I worked a lot because I didn't have a husband, I didn't have anybody, I was just sober and working and doing my thing,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna eat this because 'cause I'm running the place today." And, it was a Sunday. I don't remember closing up. I don't remember and by this point, like, this particular situation had a little happened a little bit later in the future, but I blacked out, and I went home, and at the time, I had moved back to my parents' house and left California, and I was sober by that point about 5 years. And I went over there and, I came home. I was living with my parents, and I went back to school and all that kinda stuff, and, the next morning, I was going to work, and I said to my mom, I was like, Something was off yesterday, I don't remember." And she goes, "Yeah, you came home, it was, weird." So I called up my doctor, and, I have a really good relationship with my doctor at the VA, and she was like, "Just come in, we'll take your blood and take a look." I mean, I was, like, really confused how I didn't remember the day.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
she said, "Did you drink?" And I said, "No, I've been sober 5 years, you know that." And she goes, "Well, your liver enzymes are showing that you've had at least a pint of, like, something,
Wow.
like vodka." And it turned out that I have the same reaction to sugar as I do alcohol. Once I can't
Wow.
start, I can't stop, my liver, all of that, the whole entire thing. So, it's had to be put down, and I couldn't put that down. I could not for the life of me put that down. Um,
I mean, sugar is even more pervasive than alcohol in our society, right? It's like the it's the real gateway drug. Kids start that from. I mean, I just Valentine's Day just came and went, and I had got a whole bunch of candy for my kids. And as I told you before the show, they're 5 and 3, so they're getting experiencing that from a very young age. How did you then go about? And then I guess you're also probably like frustrated as hell, saying to yourself, like, I already beat this alcohol thing. Like now I got to deal with sugar for of all things. Like what did you do to kind of tame that?
that was harder than alcohol. I was like, "Okay, well, let me try." I mean, I tried everything, and eventually what worked for me was 12-step
Okay.
program. And I basically was like, "This is mortifying. I can't believe." But my last food drunk was several months after that. And this what I'm about to tell you was a common occurrence for me.
Okay.
What I would do is I would wake up in the morning, and I'll give you kind of the addiction cycle on how this looked for me. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, "Okay, today I'm not going to I'm going on my diet. I'm not going to eat these foods. I'm going to do this. I can do this. And then by like, let's say 11 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like making it, I'm doing it. I haven't had sugar. And then by 11 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll feel like I'm doing good, but I'll like forget what happened the day before.
Yep.
And then I'll say, well, a little bit will be okay. I mean, like, seriously, what's a little bit of peanut butter that has sugar in it going to do to me? And then I would eat that, but then it would set off that craving and I would be off and running. So then by 12 o'clock, I'm starting to eat. It's okay. It's okay. I'm having this. I forget what it was like the night before. And then by 3 o'clock, I'm like full on, like, I'm having the F it's. Like, I'm like, F it. We'll start tomorrow.
Yeah.
And at some point, like, and then by the time I would come home from work, and like, at work, I had access to, get whatever I wanted, buy whatever I wanted. And then I would, let's say around 6 o'clock, it would be full on. I would close the blinds. I would come home like someone who's using drugs. And I didn't know this at the time, but I would black out.
Hmm.
And in between there, from work to home, because it was going to be my last time using, I would go from fast food restaurant to fast food restaurant to the 7-Elevens. I would be filling up the car with all of those highly palatable sugary foods. And I would be thinking to myself, this is the last day. So this is the last, you got to get it all in. So I would hit up all of these and I would be, I
Every
mean,
day.
towards the end, I was doing this once a week.
Okay.
But there were a couple, it would happen about once or twice a week. But the driving around and it's going to be that type of obsession. But I would bring usually the food home. So now I'm driving in the car like a mad woman, drunk driving, right? Like I just need crying because I don't know which one to have, what do I eat? What's my last meal? Like, what is it?
Right.
And I didn't know, but I was blacking out every night. I would go to sleep and I would eat so much that I would black out. And I mean, I put on a lot of weight. And then finally I would wake up and I would go to this 12-step meeting at 6:45 in the morning. And I remember being in there and be like, this is, stupid and F you and F that to everybody in the room. Like, this might be good for you, but you don't know like what it's actually like. And
Hmm.
I started to listen to some people there eventually, but I did put down, I finally did. And I don't know how, today I do believe in God. I have a higher power that I believe in. And it was like divine intervention somehow. Like I just put it down, and that was in 2012. And I haven't had
It's
it
cold,
since.
just cold turkey. How, how did you keep the alcohol and the eating disorder at bay when you're in this depressive state because of this cycle of addiction around sugar, which I'm assuming puts you in some pretty dark spaces where your judgment was probably very compromised on the one hand, and on the other hand, I'm sure that there's a lot of imaging issues that that are starting to resurface for you as well. How did you keep those pieces at bay, or were you also very much white knuckling the call of those demons as well as you were trying to exit? And I know that you talk about, you found a higher power, and you just one day dropped it all. Uh, but I mean? There must have been like this internal combustion going on inside of you at this point in time, and you probably didn't feel as though that you were going to get through like the eye of the storm. Can you just lay that out for the audience?
Yes, definitely. So there was a lot going on. There was so I should probably say in the meantime, I'm also in trauma therapy. I went back into therapy when so I've gone in and out of therapy at the time. Like I got sober, I went into a trauma therapy program pretty early on in sobriety, and then that, plus having like the support group. So there's so much support out there now around eating disorders. I mean, there's just so much. So I built a support group for myself, a support system, I should say. So I
Hmm.
had people I could go to. So, and I should say this, when I put the alcohol down, it was it didn't like that wasn't, I didn't even want that. Like the sugar was giving me more than, like, it wasn't something I thought, okay, I'll take that back. Towards the end of my eating, I should say, my food addiction, towards the end of that, I did have thoughts of drinking.
Okay.
And I, at that point, had been trained to ask for help so much that before I drank, because I knew for me that the eating was going to take me back to the drinking.
Mhm.
And at that
Mhm.
point, it was like, I'm either going to live or I'm going to die. And those were my options. That's what it felt like. It was either like, I want to end this, or like maybe I can have a nice life. And I think I had enough hope again because I was sober. I started to believe that there was definitely something in this world that was bigger than me, that was inside of me, that was a part of me, that was me. And I was in
Mhm.
contact with that because I knew how to access it at that point. It was, I knew how to go there. And once I learned that it wasn't this outside thing and that it was an inside thing, I think I had enough hope that, like, I didn't wanna drink,
No.
and I had enough support that that's that's the last thing I wanted to do, and I think that's what the fear of drinking is, what drove me into just the desperation of putting down the food.
Yeah. Hmm.
Does
That
that
no, no, totally makes you've painted a really, clear picture there that makes a lot of sense. It by no means does it take away from the perception, at least that I have listening to your story, and to how challenging that probably was, because it sounds like that was a dialogue that was very much happening for you at the time, trying to like recognize this inner voice, trying to recognize what this, higher being meant to you, looking at what your life could look like. And then on the other side of this scale is the hope, right? That's anchoring you to move forward. I love that. I think it makes tons of sense. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, we'd really love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. And of course, please feel free to invite somebody into the conversation. If you feel like you have a story to share on the podcast, why not apply to be a guest? You can do so by completing the form on the podcast description or find it on stackndays.com. That's stackndays.com. But for now, let's jump back into the conversation. So you put down the sugar, right?
Mhm.
What does the day after that look like? What does the week after that look like, right? You I'm assuming detoxing to some degree from the actual sugar itself, but also your routine has been kind of upended, and now you're looking at yourself and saying, okay, well, how do I now start plugging these emotional, gaps that are now showing themselves because I'm not covering them up with, with anything that I had been in the past.
I fully surrendered. I fully surrendered to that part of myself that knew how to do this. And I said, "You know what? Today, I'm gonna listen to someone else,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna choose to take their action versus mine." And some of the actions that I were told, the number one thing that I made my mantra, and I remember this clearly because it was my mantra for 6 months, was that everything, like, so my body, everything from here down didn't belong to me, that it belonged to that higher self, like that part of me who lived that way, that teenage self. Like, and at this point too, there's so much therapy involved. Like, I had tools on who is this part, like, and I'm still doing this type of work today, like
Hmm.
deep, it's like layers. And it was like, okay, I'm going to listen to someone else. And this person was like, oh, this is what I did. And then another person was like, one meal at a time and life in between. And then I made it a priority to make my meals. Like, I remember driving home from work and having worked late, and people will not go to the bar, right? People will take all the alcohol out of their house or whatever that is. And it was like, for me, it was like, no, you don't have your sober foods in your house right now. you need to go to the grocery store. It's 9:55 at night. Like, you need to go get your sober foods, and you need to make your foods for tomorrow so you don't accidentally take a bite of something that doesn't belong to you from the fridge at work and then
Yep.
end up, down that road again. And I knew that if I did, I would drink again. I knew that the pain of it was so great for me that I would want to drink again. And so I did that. And, one day turned into 6 months. And I remember, just being like, oh, my clothes are fitting looser. And that was, I think, a result of not eating that way. Obviously, I was never big. I was never a big person, but that helped, me to stay in a healthy, fit body. And I have a lot of boundaries. I put a lot of boundaries around food. And unfortunately, I was living with my parents. I was probably a jerk. I was a jerk, but I was like, you can't bring these in the house. Like, I got mad at my mom once, like really mad. And I later, sat down and have really made amends to my family for my behaviors in the past, and that's behind us now. But I remember throwing a fit in my late 20s because my mom brought peanut butter or sugar in the house. Poor thing, like,
Yeah.
and it messed me up because I wanted to eat the whole thing, and then I wanted to, probably, Lord knows. But part of my story, too, is that in high school, and skipped over this part, but I ended up doing this binge that I'm talking about. It was on Chinese food. This is right before I went into the Marines, and I went out and I had a fake ID, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just drink until I throw up. And I drank so much. And I guess at some point I blacked out and I wrote a letter to my family saying, goodbye.
Mm.
And my dad found it at 7 a.m. He woke up around 7 in the morning and he said that he saw a tiny little note sticking out from his door. And for some reason, he decided to get up and open it up. And he said he was too scared to open the door. My older sister had to go open the door.
Wow.
Ambulance came, the whole thing. If they hadn't found me, I wouldn't be here.
Wow.
So the food takes me to a really scary place.
Yeah. I'm trying to picture your mom with this peanut butter in her hand and just, wondering to herself, like, what is it with the peanut? She probably just didn't even understand, right? It just didn't even have a clue as to where you were at, even though she was probably extremely thankful that you were where you were and not where you had been, still not necessarily recognizing that you still had some hurdles to cross over on. And then yeah, that's palatable, that that recount of your dad not having the strength to come out of his own room for fear of what he would potentially find on the other side. We talked before coming on about, how seldom discussed this sort of thing is in the South Asian community. What's your sense around that today within your own family? I know that you have been able to make a bunch of amends, but this is traumatic for an entire family, right? So, what does that look like for your kind of your origin family, your core nucleus, and then what do you see from your perspective in your community? Because I'm sure there are little girls and boys out there today, trying to figure out ways to numb themselves, trying to figure out ways to fit in, even in this day and age where there may be even second, third generation in America, right? And not dealing with maybe some of the things that you were. So like, what do you see when you look back into your community now, knowing all the things that you had to experience?
Um, I think that today, a lot wait, for people like me that are, I guess, first, second, third generations, people that actually grew up here, I think that we are more vocal about it, but I don't think we've scratched the surface. I mean, today my parents will say things like, oh, they just think that I've changed, and they don't really get like, oh, I do all these things. And if I say I go to therapy or whatever, it gets very quiet and uncomfortable. But I'm open about it, and I think that I honestly, it still makes them uncomfortable to talk about. It's
Yeah.
not something that's talked about, and I've learned over the years, like, I thought that, like, oh, my amends process was to, say these things to them and tell them openly everything, and what I learned was that that's not how that works. I can be an example of the person that I wanna be in the relationship that I wanna have with them, but to unload all of this stuff on them, it's hurtful,
Yeah.
and it may injure them more than it would help them just to clear my conscience.
Right.
And so I think that, I don't think that they will ever understand, and I've made peace with that, but, like, I do think that this particular thing is not even something people are aware of, like, that it's going on at all
Yeah.
in a lot of different cultures, but very much like I know my grandmother had this.
Yeah.
I mean, I can look back in my history of just the family members that I've known, and I can be like, okay, we are riddled in with this in my and then for my and now it's just about being an example. If people see something and then they ask me, "Hey," I will tell them. But I don't freely go around and say like, "Oh." So if somebody asks me, I will say, "Yes, I don't do that because of whatever reasons," but, it has happened to me, because I'm pretty open about it where people will say something to me, or later on, I'll have a cousin or someone come and call me and say, "Hey, I remember you saying this and it's going on. Please don't tell anybody. Like, what should I do?"
Mm.
So when it comes to my family, um, I just try to be an example. Like, my kids know that I don't eat sugar, that it affects me in a negative way. And my kids also understand how, like, companies work. So, for instance, I'll give them an example. I'll be like, "Oh, okay, so and we have all these foods in the house. I've got Oreo cookies and chocolate chip cookies and all that. I have freedom from that today. I
Mhm.
do not care for it. Just like alcohol, I can be around tons of alcohol. I am very much in the mommy wine culture, and I don't drink, and all the mommies know I don't. It doesn't bother me. I don't want it. I have definitely the obsession for that has been removed. But I will let them know, like, okay, like, my son was crying once because he wanted to take this thing to school. I'm like, okay, fine, take it to school. And then I had a conversation with them where I was like, let's pretend we are the heads of, Chips Ahoy. And we were sitting around, and then my daughter was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to be the boss, and you're going to be like, yes, okay. What should we do to this packaging that the next time the kids go into the store, they're gonna scream for? Like, what should we do to this product to make? And right away, my son was like, "We should put a lot of sugar in it."
Mm.
And he knew. He was like, "Yeah, yeah." And then, my daughter was like, "And then we should put cartoon characters and whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And then that way, when the kids go in the store, we're gonna make a lot of money, right? We'll make a lot of money off this product. And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, "All right, you guys get it?"
So
And I was
simple.
like, so simple. And then I took my finger into my mouth and I pulled myself into the pantry and I was like, like, what happened to me? What happened to me? I was like, and then my son was like, "You're hooked, mommy. You're hooked like a fish." And I was like, "Yep."
Wow.
So just know that there's foods like that out there. Am I
Yeah.
telling you not to eat them? Nope. I'm
Yeah.
not telling you not to eat them. And then my daughter goes, "You're the only one in this house that's not hooked, mommy." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm not hooked because I was hooked." So that's how I explained it to them.
I think it's extremely powerful that, when you're in these positions to kind of start breaking some cycles, that you can reach forward, especially if you have children, you can reach forward and have those honest dialogues, right, based off of your own learnings. But it is so hard to reach back and pull those generations that are still existing on this planet today with you, into this reality that you fought so hard, and the space that you fought so hard to get into. And it just makes me think about like the broader ecosystem of like culture, right? And how sometimes culture is broken, just as there are certain aspects of ourselves as individuals were broken. And like silence is a coping mechanism, that families and use, and they have used for generations, to not deal with the pain that grandma perpetrated on the family, with the pain that
Mhm.
grandpa and perpetrated on the family, and uncle this and auntie that.
Mhm.
So it's tough to deal with. And when you're the child in this equation, trying to like teach up your parent or your grandparent, to your point, it's almost like, what, maybe this is just not, if they would have dealt with this in their time, maybe if they could have
Yeah.
handled it, but it's
Yeah.
my burden to bear. And I'm going to educate the next generation, so that they know what being hooked could potentially even look like. And
Mhm.
that's not a foreign concept to them, and they recognize how they're interacting with the world. So I hear you. Hats off to you on that. And your kids are incredibly sharp. They should be on Madison Avenue up in up in New York, working on ad campaigns for some of these guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, actually I had like an old timer friend of mine say to me, I've known for years. I said, God, I just don't know. Like we had to live with my mom and my dad while we were building our new house, and they were so kind to let us stay there. And I mean, that's South Asian culture too. Like you can live with your parents if you want. And so we lived with them for 5 months. And I remember I told my mom, I am going to clean out the basement. I'm going to pay for all the things to get the basement settled so we can live there. She goes, "How am I know you guys should stay upstairs. How am I going to be above my grandchildren? My grandchildren will be." I said, "No, I think it's
Mm,
best that we stay downstairs."
yeah.
And then she, all of these like South Asian habits, and she's in her 60s, late 60s, and she wanted to know, like, for my husband, what should I make him? What how I need to cook for him, right? We need to serve him. We need to, because he's a man. And I was like, he's fine. He can get his food. And she didn't know what to do with that. And I was getting really annoyed. And I was like, how am I going to deal with this? And this person said to me, your mom has been that way and lived that way for 65
Yeah.
plus years of her life.
Yeah.
Help her do what she needs to do. And I said, oh my God, that's just such a different way to look at it. So I told my mom, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I bought all the things my husband likes to eat and what he eats for breakfast and everything. And I said, here's all the things that he likes. And it was almost like 10 pounds of weight just came off of her shoulders because she was
Mm,
like, oh, okay. And then it was fine. And I just let her. So for me, it's been a lot. Healing with and alongside my parents has been not enabling them, but helping them be who they've always known how to be until, because I can't change them. I
yeah.
have to come to acceptance with who they are and find my place in who they are, and then have a whole bunch of boundaries around all the other stuff that comes along with that. So I have
Yeah.
a very good relationship with my parents today. It's very boundaried. Um, and I'm there for them in a way I didn't think I would be able to.
Mm,
So, and
that
that's because I'm sober.
that's lovely, to be able to have that relationship with the people that clearly care about you the most, and just you were never able to do that because you were being blinded by this, that, and the other. I get it. Um, okay, so I got a couple questions as well, as we kind of land the plane here. If you're down.
Hmm.
Cool. So, for someone who's sitting there and they're trying to, they're in, some of their darkest days, and and it could be any one of the things that we've talked about. It could be sugar, right? Even it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, but they don't necessarily know what the first step is, and they don't have a cousin that they can look to be like, hey, he's sober or she's sober. Let me reach out. What would you suggest to that person being their first step?
So I think for me, the first step is to ask for help. Like, wherever it is that you feel comfortable asking for help, and have an open mind, because I have received help from places that I didn't think would be helpful. And so, on my page too, I provide a lot of resources under my posts, and
Mhm.
I should probably make a little highlight. But like, um, whatever addiction that there is today in today's world, there's a 12-step program for it. So
Right.
there's a free option there. And then also, if it's around eating disorders, if you just go online and search up whatever your addiction is and free help, I'm talking a place where you can go that is free, you will find something. And I would say go with anything that you can get right
Mhm.
now. And then from there, you can choose what you resonate with. Because through my 17 years, well, I'll have 17 years in March, it's been a constant, evolution of things that I've learned through avenues, really, truly, that I didn't want to do. So, like a few years back, something came along, a type of therapy came along, and I was like, oh, that just, ugh, I don't want to do that. I'm in that therapy now. And it's changing my life. It's
Mhm.
deeper work, and it just allows me to. So, yes, take whatever help you can get. And if you have all the funds in the world, like, awesome, good for you. Like, use them. Use it. You're worth it. You're worth the money. Even if you don't, like, you're worth the money, but you don't even need money in today's world
Yep.
to find help. And it's everywhere. People are, I feel like, I don't know if it's a trend right now, but a lot of like sober seems to be kind of trendy.
Yeah.
But
I think people are I think there's just a broad recognition that there is a lot of, brokenness out there, and people are refusing to live that way, and, and they don't want others to feel that way, and that's why we're in the space as well, so, like, it's very loud for us, but I think it's trickling out into mainstream. I mean, we
it
see it
is.
in a lot of, different aspects, and especially how the younger generations are interacting with the world around them, so hopefully they can
Yeah.
preemptively avoid some of the stuff that we, unknowingly got ourselves into, at their age.
Yeah, they have access to seeing a lot more because of the internet. They have
Yep.
a access of seeing what these things, and a lot of these kids nowadays, like we have a couple 8th graders and teenagers in the neighborhood, and they're just not into it. I mean nobody smokes anymore.
Yeah.
Like, that was cool back in the 90s, and it's not even a thing really. And the only people that I know that are still smoking are the people that I knew smoking back then.
Yeah.
But nobody else is really um, so yeah.
There's something out there though, because it's like, at the end of the day, all of these like vices to our, our conversations are covering up, darker spots within ourselves, and those dark spots are going to continue to exist in the young people of our world, and so what are they going to turn to if they're not able to turn to family, adults, friends who are willing to have those conversations with them and help them work through things that they otherwise are not equipped to do so on their own. So, I mean, I do agree, like the internet has helped, but I feel like as parents, and I think about this all the time, like what if it's not going to be alcohol? What is it that, my child
Mhm.
might potentially turn to because he's having such a hard time finding a friend group at school, or because, she's having a hard time with her body image that, is coming
Mhm.
from outside of the house that I don't have any control over. So I don't know. It scares the hell out of me,
Yeah,
but
it does to me too. And when it comes to the body image and all of that kind of stuff, like my number one thing with my kids, my son included, is it's all about, in our house, emotional regulation.
mm,
They have all kinds of tools for emotional regulating their emotions, and then also esteem, self-esteem. Like, what is self-esteem and how do you gain self-esteem? And teaching them that self-esteem comes from esteemable acts, not from the car that you drive and
mm,
the thing that you do. So from a young age, when we go to the grandparents' house, it's about, hey, did you ask grandma how you can help her? And then I'll ask them later on, how did you feel after you helped her? And you could sit down and play cards with her. How did that feel? Great, like it felt great. Or sometimes they'll say, well, it sucked. I'm like, okay, well, even if it sucked, I just want you to know you did something for her today that was really valuable, and money, you can't buy that with money. And you
Yeah.
should be really proud of yourself. So, things like that. So they go into the world knowing what self esteem looks like versus what I was, given, these the self esteem I thought was going to come from having a certain body, having a certain car. I mean, that's what I'm undoing now. So maybe they'll have enough tools, maybe that they don't turn to something, that maybe they'll turn to a friend and talk about it, and or understand what emotional disturbance is and choose to move through that emotion rather than cover it up with a substance. So who knows? We can just do the best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny when you talk about that, it makes me think that, we almost had to deal with, and this is an explicit podcast, so I'll say this. We almost had to deal with all of our shit so that we could have these conversations with our children, so that we can teach them the lessons that, that we're teaching our children. I would certainly not be able to otherwise, look at life through that lens and share that with them had I not been through some of the things that I've been through. And then the other thing that I was thinking about is, like, sometimes I worry, and your kids are a little older than mine, about my son and my daughter coming home from school with, like, a math problem that perhaps I forgot how to do. And, like, I'm less concerned with the math problem in how I teach them versus, like, teaching them to, like, look at esteemable acts as something, to aspire to, versus, trying to, sell, more cookies at the bake sale, so that you could have bragging rights. Um, so you're right. Like, the hope is that it works out. It sounds like you're doing a fantastic job. So hats off to
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can't do the math, by the way. My daughter is in advanced math,
Okay.
and I was not an advanced student. I was disassociated, so as a special education student. And so
Mm,
I tell her, I'm like, well, mommy doesn't know how to do this. And then I usually tell them a story about something that happened. And so with me, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, how did you get through? It's like, well, that's why you guys learned a lot of the things that you learned at a young age through song. Because
mm,
later on, I figured out, again, like through sobriety, when I was in college, I was able to ask for help with my classes. And then I found out I had debilitating dyslexia.
mm.
And through sobriety and training my brain and reading, it's not so bad anymore. I can read out loud and I don't need to do that. I found out my dad never told me that he had it. He is the number one scientist in his field in the world, and he has dyslexia. And he told me, he
Wow.
was like, nothing stopped me, not even the fact that I couldn't speak English.
Wow. Wow.
So, yeah, I think anything is possible. And I do think that, you know, when we're sober and we're living the lifestyle that we live today, we are breaking patterns deep into like the DNA tissue of our kids just by being sober.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I had a couple other questions, but I think that it might be worthwhile just ending the conversation right there. I think that's a powerful message, and I do appreciate it. But before we do let you go, I want to make sure that folks can find you. So if you wouldn't mind sharing all of your handles and sites and anything else that you'd like to share.
Sure. Right now, I basically just have my Instagram. I just started it not too long ago. So it's at Sweta, Sweta. I am currently working on a website, which is going to be sweta.com. And yeah, that's really, and then I have a YouTube channel, which is Sweta Sansara. I think you have my last name.
Hmm.
Um, and I will be sharing a lot more of my journey on there. So that's really it right now. My Instagram, I don't really do TikTok. So
Cool. Well, I'll make sure that all of that is included in our show notes. Sweta, thank you so much for spending some time. I really do appreciate it. I know it's been a little bit of time coming, but I'm glad we were able to make it
me
happen.
too. Me too. This was an awesome conversation. I'm glad that it got out there, and I certainly hope that people will find something in my story that speaks to their life for sure.
No, I think they will. I think they will. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way, you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices in healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.